Greetings, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today for the Colorado Victim Advocate podcast, sponsored by Intervention. We're a nonprofit organization based right here in Colorado. Intervention has several effective programs that we always want to be talking about and highlighting, one of them being our Community Corrections Division. Today, we are joined with Josey, a program manager at the Intervention Community Corrections Program in the 1st Judicial District. Welcome, Josey.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate you being here. So, a lot of people really don't understand, what community corrections really is. And so, I'd like you to tell us what community corrections is if you were explaining it to somebody who had never had contact with it, but has come in contact with it as a result of a criminal case of some kind.
Sure. I think community corrections is most commonly referred to as a halfway house. And in Colorado, we serve two primary populations. Those populations would be diversion clients, clients that we're trying to divert from prison, and transition clients, clients that we're helping transition out of prison. So we house these clients there to engage in treatment services, it's residential living, work on stabilization factors, and ideally get back out to independent living, whether that's on parole or in our non-residential program.
So, you talked about a lot of things right there. And so let's just kind of back up for a second. So, how does somebody actually get into your program? Because you talked about diversion folks. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Absolutely. Our diversion folks would come to us. Hypothetically, you have somebody who becomes eligible for community corrections. In my jurisdiction, that would look like they're on their third or more felony, or they have a probation revocation. Community corrections becomes an option for the judge to sentence to. So it's alternative sentencing, giving the judge the option in lieu of a prison sentence.
Oh, okay. So does the judge, how does the judge make that decision? Does that decision do they take that as a recommendation from somebody? I mean, what's the process that goes before that? So if somebody's been sentenced and, how does that work? How does a judge make that decision?
Sure, the judge would lean on probably the opinion of the previous probation officer or attorney to make the recommendation of community corrections, but ultimately it's at the discretion of the judge to typically choose between probation, community corrections, or a prison sentence.
And so as part of that process, I know that there is something called a community corrections board. Mm-hmm. And how does that board play into this whole process?
In the 1st Judicial, board screening is essentially the first step, allowing the judge to have that option at sentencing. The Community Corrections Board would screen the client as long as the program decided to accept them, and that would allow the judge to have community corrections as an option in front of them when they're seeing the client in their courtroom.
So, and how many folks are on this board, and who makes up the board?
We have about 20, and it's a bunch of different representatives of organizations in our jurisdiction. So, probation, the public defender's office, police force, community members.
And so those folks, when they are meeting, if you can talk about that, I mean, what are they talking about when they're reviewing a case?
Always a handful of things, and mostly that includes what the client's criminal history looks like, what their involvement in our community looks like, what their community ties are, where they're at, and what we call stabilization factors, so employment, finances, housing, and also what the program can do for that client. We're always asked to describe what our plan would be if the corrections board did agree to allow the client to come into our program.
Okay, and so at that point, when they do come into the program or they're eligible to come into the program, kind of like what's the first steps of somebody coming into your facility, your program itself?
So clients would go through an orientation process. As you can imagine, many clients coming into the program have never been to community corrections before. So they'll be shown the building, they'll be explained sort of our rules and regulations of living in community or residential living. And the first goal is to pair a client with a case manager And then they'll be able to focus on employment, vocational resources, and treatment pairing.
So a lot of these folks that are there in the facility, you said that they have felonies. Are there violent felons there that are in the facility, or is it some type of nonviolent crime? What do you have there?
All of the clients in our programs will be felon offenders, and we accept every type of offense into our program. We don't have any restrictions. Some programs don't allow sex offenders or other various violent crimes. We don't have any restrictions on anything like that.
And is that the same thing when you have those transition folks come in from Department of Corrections?
That's correct.
Okay. And so you talked about that earlier, about it being some kind of residential or dorm style living. What do you mean by that? In that type of situation?
It's definitely community living. For my facility specifically, average room size is about 4 persons in a room. Smallest rooms are 2, and the largest ones would be 8. But yeah, the ladies and gentlemen, they live together in bunk bed style living, truly community place.
And so you have them divided up, male and female sections of the facility?
Yes, our facility is separated by male and female wings. It does get a little more granular about how we place clients into rooms together, whether they have a history of abuse or being an abuser. That's how we help gauge who's going to room with who.
And so in this facility, is it any type of, because a lot of people just think that when they hear the word corrections, they're thinking that it's a locked facility of some kind. Is that part of this process?
That's a great question. And I think it's one of the things people are shocked by when they come to tour us at the facility. There's no barbed wire fence. The doors are unlocked. We are a hands-off facility. If somebody were to choose to leave the facility grounds, they would be able to. And we would simply air a warrant request for that client. We would, of course, do everything in our power to motivate them to want to stay in the program, but there's no fence or deadbolted door keeping them in.
So with regards to that, if a client does escape, that probably doesn't happen a lot, because a lot of these folks apparently seem to want to be there, so they won't have to go to DOC. Is that correct?
That is correct. We always tell our clients this is a voluntary program. If you don't want to be here, there are other options for you to serve your sentence. And a lot of our clients, many of them have had experience in the Department of Corrections and are very motivated to not go back to the Department of Corrections, which is typically what would happen if a client chose to walk away from the program.
And so kind of along those lines right there. So how would somebody, not succeed at your program? How would somebody, basically be either not allowed to come back other than an escape? What would be kind of the process then?
Some types of unsuccessful termination from the program would be for a technical violation, for an escape, or if a client committed a new crime while under our supervision, they typically wouldn't be permitted to stay in the program by us or our county's board.
And so that person would be sent back to court, and then they would just be sentenced then at that point?
That's exactly right.
Okay. And so now that we talked about that part, how do they succeed? What are the levels that somebody has to do with that process?
The average stay for our clients is about 9 months in the residential program. It's a level system starting on level 1, going to level 4. And each level, there's a little bit more that's expected of them, whether that's treatment engagement, stability with their employment, stability with their finances. And when that client gets to level 4, they're either going to our non-residential program, our diversion clients would, or our transition clients would hopefully be going to parole independently. Another type of successful discharge from the program would be sentence discharge, or a DOC client reaching their statutory discharge date.
Okay. And so if they are achieving this level, I mean, you talked about that there's a possibility that they could live outside of the facility itself, but they're still under supervision. I mean, how does that work? I mean, what does that process look like?
It looks really similarly to probation supervision. So at this point, we have somebody that's reached peak stability in our residential program. We approve them to live in the community, whether that's independently or with a loved one, and they report back to the facility most of the time weekly for case manager meetings, but also randomly for sobriety monitoring services. So any given non-residential client is probably making contact with the facility 1 to 2 times a week. We're also doing things like random curfew calls and verifications that they're where they're supposed to be.
And on something like that, I mean, so it sounds like this facility just, community corrections is a 24/7 operation. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right.
And so you talked a little bit about that. So can you talk about some of the positions that you have there at your facility and kind of what they do?
Sure. The 2 departments that I oversee, one is called our Community Corrections Specialist Department, our main office, previously referred to as security. They really oversee the day-to-day operations of the facility. They're doing sobriety monitoring services for our clients, intakes and discharges. They're doing searches and UAs. They're doing medication administration. The other department that I oversee is Case Management Department. Each client is paired with a case manager, and that case manager meets with the client at least once a week to work on things like vocational assistance, treatment referrals, and helping the client advance through their level system.
And so in doing so, when they're working with their case manager, is this something that they have to meet with all the time?
Meeting with the case manager?
Yes.
Yes, they're required to meet with the case manager every single week so that the case manager can just be observing the progress. And if there's a lack of progress, figuring out the root of why and helping them advance. So the case manager is the primary contact. If a client is maybe engaging in behavior that's discouraged by the program, the case manager is typically the one intervening on that behavior to try to encourage positive behavior change, which is the overall goal of our program.
And in doing so, in talking about that with the case manager and working with those clients that are coming into the facility, I mean, what is a standard number of folks that you have as a case manager?
So an average caseload would be about 20 clients. For our case managers that work with more specialized populations, so for example, for our facility, a dual diagnosis client who is working through substance use disorder as well as some serious and persistent mental illness, that case manager would probably have about 15 clients, as well as our sex offender case managers, they have about 15 clients.
And so how long does a meeting go with somebody with the case manager? So you have a client that's there at the facility, they're coming in. How long would a meeting with that client take? And I can presume it's they're just meeting with them one-on-one?
Absolutely. It's a one-on-one meeting, and we target our meeting time around an hour. Of course, with our maybe higher needs clients, our dual diagnosis clients, our sex offenders, that meeting might run a little bit longer, and that's why the caseloads are smaller. But 45 minutes to an hour is the sweet spot for a case manager meeting.
And, and so you also talked about just kind of the day-to-day folks, the folks that you said that you formally call security. What do those folks do?
They're walking through the facility multiple random times a day, really to ensure facility safety, to make sure all of the clients are where they're supposed to be. If they're in the facility, verifying that they're there. If they're signed out somewhere in the community, calling to do GPS monitoring or verbal check-ins to make sure clients are where they are signed out to in the community. And the other tasks I mentioned, urinalysis, breathalyzers, person property searches, medication administration, things of that nature.
And so those folks that are staying at your facility, I mean, do they have, general types of jobs in the community itself, or are they like going outside of the community, or it's wherever they can, find employment?
Yeah, our clients work really hard to find stabilization with their employment. It's a huge priority for many of our clients when they come into the program. And we have a plethora of jobs that our clients are working from common jobs from construction, barbers. We have clients who are intake coordinators or receptionists at treatment facilities. We've had clients that are in the healthcare industry. Really anything you can think of, we try to make it work for our clients while they're in our program.
And so those folks that are actually staying there at your facility, so how do they leave for your facility and then go to work and then come back? I mean, what's the process that goes on with that? Because a lot of people would think, well, do they just sleep there or what do they do?
Yeah, I think the most exciting part about community corrections is what clients are doing in the community. That's the whole purpose of the program, is to encourage clients to feel confident and competent working outside of the program. So approved community access is as simple as getting an approved pass through the case manager. For example, if a client was going to work, the case manager would call to verify that employment, get all the details in the employment, they'd put in a pass, and then the client would sign out through the main office or the community corrections specialist.
And so you talked about these two different basically positions that you have, those folks that are seeing and doing the counts and things like that coming in, but also case manager. I mean, how would somebody, are there specific types of requirements they have if somebody wants to come work there at the facility?
Mm-hmm. For our case management staff, we're looking for somebody typically with a background in human services, social work, psychology, criminal justice. Our main office, or CCS, would be more of an entry-level position, somebody who's exploring what work in the criminal justice field can look like. But yeah, we encourage all types of backgrounds, human service or otherwise, to come dip their toe in the criminal justice pot.
But ultimately, they are all working directly with criminal offenders.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so a lot of times too, people who are in the community, they just don't really understand really what community corrections does. And as we're coming to, the close of this podcast, tell me why community corrections is an important part of the criminal justice system.
I would say that community corrections is the perfect intersect of corrections and rehabilitation. There's really a focus on treatment engagement, stabilization, so that when somebody's done with their sentence, they can be successful independently. We're not only an outlet for the DOC, but an alternative sentencing option for a judge as well, who might want to prevent somebody from getting to that step. So it's a great option for clients that might just need a little more supervision than probation can provide, but a little less than the DOC can provide.
Good. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Josey. Today's podcast is going to be posted not only on Spotify, but on our YouTube channel. We want to thank all of you for listening and hope you come back again. Thank you.